Welcome to Life on Life's Terms. We have Chelsea's mom in the house today. Her name is Lori, and some of the topics that we're going to talk about is when is it that Chelsea's mom knew that Chelsea had an addiction issue? Are parents really responsible for their child's addiction? How deep can denial go? What is an intervention, and what sobriety looks like for mom? So, how's your day going so far, Lori?
Not too bad.
I know you're a little bit nervous sitting in front of the mic.
I am.
Everybody is. That's just the protocol of what it is. So let's talk a little bit about the childhood of Chelsea. What was that like?
The childhood of Chelsea. It was rough at times. I had separated from her father, and that was tough on her as well as on her sister.
Yeah. And then schooling, so on and so forth. Was there a lot of back and forth with Chelsea from your home to his home and so on and so forth? No.
I didn't split up with her father until Chelsea was 15.
Okay.
And she stayed with him.
Oh, yeah. Chelsea was saying that on the show.
Right.
Yeah. So let's talk about when Chelsea came of age and started drinking. Because you and I pre-show had a little bit of an interview, and we sat down and talked about some stuff. And so you were saying, like, everybody around you was telling you she's partying a lot. But how deep was that when people were telling you this, that she was, air quotes, partying? Like, because Chelsea admits to drinking in junior high. So did you have any idea that that was happening?
I had no idea that she was drinking in junior high.
Yeah.
And when she got into high school and, you know, the parties and stuff like that, I thought, okay, this is just teenage stuff.
Yeah. And then and then there was blackouts, so on and so forth. But that was obviously unbeknownst to you.
I didn't know about those.
Yeah. And then so how were you taking, or how were you feeling about the information that was coming to you from family members saying that she's partying too much? Did you see it as extreme? Was there any kind of like maybe it's more than just her being a teenager?
I didn't see it like the way that they did because they were around her more. Mm-hmm. I wasn't around when she was partying every weekend or during the week. I didn't see all of that. So I just thought it was just normal stuff.
Yeah. And so, like, let's look at your teens. Were your teens similar to Chelsea's, or were you much more laid back?
I was more laid back. I mean, yes, I did do the partying.
Yeah. We all do. I mean, my mom did it too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a part of adolescence, I think, right?
You do the drinking. You do some of the drugs. Like, I mean, Of course, I did marijuana too, just like most people.
Well, it's legal now. I mean, shit. Yeah.
No, yeah, right.
Yeah. like it's not heroin anymore, right?
It wasn't legal when I was doing it.
Yeah. Me too, oddly enough.
Right.
Exactly. So, I mean, yeah. So, if you were to dare to compare or parallels, I guess you didn't really know what her drinking looked like, but were you kind of prefacing it as in the same way that you used drugs and alcohol in your teens, like almost like the filter? Well, she couldn't be doing any worse than I was doing. Like, was that statement?
Yeah.
So we're kind of like justifying,
right?
Well, she's just growing up, right? Did you ever have somebody come to you in those, or just like in her early 20s, say to you, you know, Chelsea's a blackout drunk now? Like, did you see the progression anywhere in that way?
No. Nobody ever came to me and said that she was a blackout drunk.
So let's talk about Chelsea being a closet drinker, because that's really what she was, right?
Exactly.
How often would she seclude herself from you and the rest of your family in her early 20s?
It was almost like she would just shut everybody out. She wasn't talking to everybody. Mm-hmm. And down the road, we found out why. Yeah. Because she had a 2-6 of this or whatever in her room.
Yeah. So she was under your guys' roof, or, well, her dad's roof.
Under her dad's roof.
Yeah. and then hiding alcohol in the house.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did she ever show up at like any family function just inebriated?
Yes.
How did that feel?
I felt almost embarrassed, but I felt bad for her too, because of the way other family members were looking at her, and almost horrified and disgusted that she would actually show up at a family function and be inebriated already.
Yeah, yeah. And as that was happening, did you ever try to pull her? Because I know from my own personal experience, my mom would try to pull me out of the situation. Like, oh, you should just go home.
I did.
Yeah, yeah. Or she'd drive me home or whatever, but never really talked to me that, like, this is inappropriate.
No, I never ever said that it was inappropriate. I just tried to shield her.
Yeah, yeah.
From other people.
Almost tried to protect.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the embarrassment that you had felt, is that because of the reflection of your child to you? Or was it like, my child's drunk? Or like, was there any acknowledgement in that moment is what I'm kind of wondering.
I was embarrassed for her. Not for myself.
I see. Yeah. I think, so I've been in situations like that with my mom where she was more embarrassed that I was such a fall down drunk. However, in that moment, and my mom was really young when she was raising me. So my mom would be like, what kind of man are you? So it almost became like this, what the fuck are you doing kind of thing? Like, grow up. And then like Chelsey and I were saying in one of the shows that we just recorded, one of the things that ended up happening was we would actually equate our masculinity or our self-worth by the amount that we could drink, right? And then our friends would actually endorse this. So it's very strange to us when we're all of a sudden confronted with our family and we're accepted by our friends about the amount that we can drink. And your family's like, what the fuck are you doing? Right? I mean,
that's very true. Very true.
It's almost a shock for us. So after that moment, did you find, or did you see her become more secluded from the family?
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
She would quit going to family functions. She'd say, "Oh, I don't need to go to that. They're always judging me." Yeah, I like to have a few drinks, but they look down on me because of it. So she would just quit going.
Wow. And how tough was that for you to accept?
It was tough.
Yeah.
Because we would have, whether it be Christmas or somebody's birthday party, and everybody would ask me, "Where's Chelsey? Why isn't Chelsey here?"
Yeah.
And then, being a mother, I'm making excuses for her. Oh, she wasn't feeling well, so she decided to stay at home.
Fucking Chelsey wasn't feeling well for like 5 years there.
Right.
Right. I mean, I know for my personal situation, my mom would just say, well, he's in Alberta. Okay. Right? So that was a good enough excuse. But the reality is I'm calling her saying this is the sound of me dying and leaving a message on the phone. Right? Like,
right.
Mom was like, thank God nobody else heard that.
Yeah.
Right? Now the whole world hears it. But so, yeah, I mean, and the fact that you were making these excuses, did you start recognizing that at that point that it may be too, like, she may actually have a real issue here?
Yes.
So in that case, let's talk a little bit about enabling, because without the family, from the perspective of an alcoholic who's sober, right, or a drug addict, I'm an ex-drug addict that's sober, we would consider that enabling by not allowing the doors to get broken down by the family saying, well, fuck you then. You know what I mean? Like, without the honesty being there, right?
Right.
So how deep at that moment do you think, as a mother, your denial was? Because I think the denial really comes before the enabling, right? Is it almost that you didn't want to believe that it was that big of a problem?
I didn't want to believe that it was that big a problem.
So Chelsey says that she thought that when you realized it was as big of a problem was when you had to buy her the Mickey and she was naked in the bathtub. I suspect, though, it was prior to that, now that we're talking.
It was prior to that.
And So what was the actual situation? Let's go through the thoughts of how that all happened.
Well, going over to visit at her place and finding out that she had tried to commit suicide in the bathtub the first time.
Okay.
I wasn't contacted about that. I didn't know that she had done that until, because I kept saying, well, I'm going to come over and visit. And she kept telling me no.
Yeah.
And she said, no, I'm not feeling good. And then I went over there and her best friend had called somebody else to go over and she said, Chelsea needs help. And so when I got over there a few days later, I see these cuts up both of her arms. And
So let's stop right there for a second. What's the thought? Did you think that was alcohol, or did you think that was just an emotional suffering?
emotional suffering, I guess you could say. And then, of course, I was thinking that the emotional suffering is why she's drinking.
So in that, so in that moment, we're seeing the alcohol as the solution to her emotional suffering, as opposed to the alcoholism being the conduit for her emotional suffering.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? That's where I think the denial piece can become enforced, because we don't want to believe that it's the alcohol that's producing this. We want to believe that it's the emotions, and that's her solution to her emotions, right?
Right.
So I think, if I could break it down in this way, I think when we go along that line as parents, right, we almost have to flip it. It's the booze that's pushing, because booze is a depressant. We know it. We know that as a fact. However, when we're looking at our kid or our child, facts don't matter. It's blinded. And we're looking at it as she has an emotional struggle, therefore she's drinking. Not she's drinking, and therefore an emotional struggle is happening. See?
Exactly. Yeah, I can see that.
So I understand like that it's really difficult. And to be honest with yourself, if you were to look at the honesty that you had with yourself in regards to the situation of your daughter in that moment, can you recognize the amount of hoodwinking that we're almost putting ourselves through? Mm-hmm. And it's almost easier to believe, like, oh, they'll get through this on their own. It's just a time, right?
And that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so this is all happening. You recognize that there's a problem in the moment. And then when did it become where you recognize this is not going away in time?
Because then I started to see how much she was drinking. Like we had previously said, it was almost like she was a closet drinker and she was staying away from everybody, including myself. And then I really started to pay more attention. After the first suicide attempt, I started really paying more attention. And that's when I seen how bad her addiction was.
Now, let me ask you this question, because I think this happens. So a lot of the reason why this particular episode is here is because we get so many comments from parents out there about how to deal with their kids and addiction. And I think one of the things that I don't know, I'm just going to drop this question on you, is how much were you pushing Chelsea at this point or at any point to go to treatment?
I tried to get her to admit that she had a problem.
So now let's stop there for a second. Let me ask you this. How much would she acknowledge that she had a problem to your face in that moment?
She didn't.
That's right.
Not at all.
That's right.
She said, I don't have a problem.
That's right.
She said, I can handle this. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And all the while, were you believing that? Or did you want to believe it?
I wanted to believe it.
And how long did that wanting to believe it happen?
A long time.
Yeah. So, and in saying that, because it happened for that long, we have been enamored with enabling, because we're believing in the deceit, right? We as addicts have this saying called denial. Didn't even know I lied. Okay. That's the acronym, because we don't know. I mean, lying is like especially in active addiction, it's like saying your name. You know, you have a story for everything and you try to keep everybody apart from each other. I think pre-show, when I was saying that, like that's a an addictive behavior that we all do, I could almost see your eyes like, oh yeah, she
Yeah.
didn't want me talking to her dad. She didn't want her
No.
dad talking to me. You know what I mean? She didn't want me talking to her aunt. She didn't want me, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
she's putting everybody into a compartment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in saying that, as she's endorsing this whole idea, like, I don't have a problem, you're like, well, it's almost like this, like you're dragging your feet to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
now, do you think spelling out the hard, cold facts to her, if you could go back in time, do you think that would have served any more purpose, or do you think it would have chased her away more?
Would have chased her away more. Because she wasn't willing to listen to the hard, cold facts, as you say.
Yeah.
And I just had to step back.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't walk away from her.
Mm-hmm.
I just had to quit talking about her going into treatment or her getting help or going to AA or anything like that, because the more I did that, the further she pushed me away.
So obviously denial's really thick at that moment, right? In her active use, right? Because that's what we do as addicts. I know for my mom, the hardest thing for her to accept was that she wasn't responsible for my addiction. And when I was in active addiction, she had a really hard time to not say that it was her fault, right? Can you kind of be empathetic towards those, or even be sympathetic? Can you step into that role of saying it's my fault that my child's an addict?
Yes.
Because we get that, we get that all the time from parents.
Yes.
And being an addict, saying to you, there's no way you're responsible. It was going to happen regardless. And I understand why it's so difficult for parents to accept, because we want to accept the responsibility of the outcome of their childhood, right? However, like I said to you pre-show, I know addicts who come from two teachers, white picket fence, and they still became an addict. I know people who are $50-60 million rich in family, and those kids still come to my AACA meetings. The one thing that I can honestly say about addiction is it does not discriminate. It doesn't give a fuck if you're purple, blue, yellow, or orange. It doesn't give a shit how much your family has for income. It doesn't give a shit how little it has. All that ends up happening is we as addicts use it. That's what ends up happening. It becomes a bigger problem than we think. We're the ones who ultimately had, I'll put it to you this way, and Chelsey has admitted this, and I think this eases it a little bit. We knew we had a problem from the first time we drank, because we weren't a normal drinker. We were a blackout. Okay, we went too far. Okay, and
Right.
because of that, and I when I work with addicts, I this is the conversation we had. If you had decided the first time that you drank that you weren't normal, do you think your life would have been any part of addiction? Nope. And I'll tell you what, Lori, there are people out there who recognized it the first time they drank and never drank again. There are people who've done that. Those are called heavy users. And heavy users, when provided with sufficient enough reason to stop using and drinking, can do so. But those are the people who are primed to cross the line and become an addict like me. One is too many and 1,000 is never enough. And there was nothing anybody could have did to stop that. It was going to happen. You can't teach an addict not to drink. You can't teach an addict to drink normally. And you can't teach an addict to use drugs normally. It's an impossibility for us. It just cannot happen, right? And that's from the onset. It wasn't a line we crossed. Some say we were born this way. Some say this is what it was. This was the gift that God gave us, so to say, if you could call it a gift.
It's not a gift.
Right? But at the same time, I mean, does that ease the tension a little bit about trying to take on the responsibility? Because I think that's a hard piece for parents in a whole, right? And let me ask you this. Why is it that you feel that you're responsible for her addiction?
Because I guess I maybe felt that, well, I still feel that I wasn't there for her enough when she needed a mother. I guess I feel that if I had been more available to her emotionally and someone there that she could talk to when she was having issues at school or with boys or anything like that, I feel that if I was there, then maybe she wouldn't have started drinking to cover up what was really bothering her.
Okay, so if we look at that, that wasn't the precursor for us to use. Even like when I was talking a bit, this show hasn't been out, you and I talking now,
Right.
but it will be out when this is published. I went through horrible bullying as a young kid, just horrible stuff. And that still wasn't the precursor, however, for me to go and drink. The only reason why I drank and I used was because I finally felt comfortable with my friends. There was nothing that anybody could have helped me with through my young life to put me into a place where I would have felt comfortable with my friends. I always felt uncomfortable. Always. Until finally, liquid courage and some marijuana and a little bit of cocaine and some heroin to fall asleep allowed me to feel like I was accepted.
So if you can't beat them, join them.
I wouldn't say it was peer pressure.
No.
It was one of these things where it just allowed me to feel comfortable with those people.
Right.
And I never identified with anybody throughout my entire life until I found that group. Right? That's just, so really at the end of the day, it was a self-esteem issue that we didn't even know we had. And there was nothing, if I don't know I have the issue, even as a child, how does a parent? You don't. You can't know more than your kid. You only know as much as they show you, and they don't even know they have the issue. Fair?
Fair enough.
I mean, and so I think that eases it, because I get this question all the time from parents. Well, it's my fault. And the way how I say it is, you know what, if you think it's your fault, you'll never get past the idea that they're responsible for their own actions. And then this is what then endorses hiding them from being inebriated at a family function.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That's where it all kind of stems from, right? We've said this before. As much as we think the addicts are fucked up, so are the parents. Right? Especially going through addiction. And the reason why I say that is because we're feeding off of that codependence back and forth. Yet we don't even know we're endorsing it all the way through, that manipulative. I mean, as much as I'm addicted to the drugs, I can tell you this. At one point, my mom was just as addicted to the chaos in my life. And the way how she was addicted was, is he going to call tonight? Is he not going to call tonight?
Right.
Shit, what's going on? All the time on the thought in the back of her head. Right? Well, that's an obsession. If you're thinking about your kid all the time, that becomes obsessive thinking. Right? And when we're in that place, well, that's a very toxic relationship then. Yet, I think as parents and children, it's really hard not to go there.
It is very difficult. I still, and I always will, because
Well, she's your kid, yeah.
I'm a mother. I mean, I'm always wondering how she's doing, how she's coping, because it's hard being a single mom. And I'm wondering if she can keep up with coping with that without thinking, oh, well, geez, maybe I could just have a drink and that'll ease off some of the stress.
Yeah.
It's always in the back of my mind.
100%. I mean, we'll get into that in a little bit.
Okay.
I think, so when did the veil of denial lift? Like, when was it gone where you were just like, you know what, Chelsey, you're an alcoholic, like in your own self-talk? When did it, can you remember that as a defining moment?
I can't really put my finger on any one specific moment. It was just all of a sudden it's like, okay, she seriously does have a problem. And then when I was suggesting,
Treatment,
detoxing and treatment, and
so when did you recognize that you couldn't help? Like, she wasn't listening to your advices.
when she just kept pushing me away and she was getting angry.
Yeah. And then, so in this moment, if we look at this from now to then, what my so if I had met you in that moment and I was sober, my suggestion would have been like, go talk to people from AA, and every time she's in her elusive lulls, get them to come over and talk to her, because you're never going to make it happen. I think the hardest thing for parents. Oh, sorry.
No, I actually did that.
Yeah.
I brought somebody over that talked to her down the road. And this is actually, the suggestion was made by this other person to get her into treatment. And I thought, okay, a recovering alcoholic, speaking with her, I felt that would be a better move on my part.
Was Chelsey more responsive to the alcoholic?
Yes, she was.
So let me ask you this, and I'm just going to set this up, and I don't mean to break anybody's knees, okay?
No.
How difficult is it as a parent to recognize that a stranger can do more with advising than it is for your own blood?
It hurts.
Yeah.
It hurts big time.
Yeah, because you love them so damn much, right?
Exactly.
But you see that, realize, in my opinion, and I'm just going to put this filter on it, I think in that moment, what we all acknowledge is that the relationship between mom and daughter is so toxic that nothing's happening from mom's side. It just can't. So we need this other person to intervene, right? Like I've always said, if my little brother had an addiction issue, I'm pretty damn good at what I do. Okay, I'm not the reason why people get sober, but I'm pretty damn good at helping people into treatment when they're ready to go. I could not do that with my brother. He wouldn't listen to me. He's my brother. It's almost like our blood to blood is like a fuck you. I need an absolute stranger to come in and do that.
Yeah.
And it hurts. It hurts when that is what that's what ends up becoming of the situation, and you have to recognize that you need to relinquish that much, right? So this guy comes in and he talks, or this person comes in and talks to her. How did you feel when she finally went to treatment?
Oh, it was a process to get her into the treatment facility because there was a waiting period.
Yeah.
Because they needed to know that she was serious about wanting
Yeah.
to go into treatment. Understandably so. It was stressful waiting because during that time while she was waiting to go into treatment, she was still drinking. And they told her that you cannot come unless you are sober. So she had to detox. She had to go into a detox facility downtown here to be sober the day we took her in. Driving down there, I was nervous as heck that she was not going to, that she was going to say, turn the car around and change my mind, I'm not going.
Yeah.
But once she went into treatment, it was such a huge relief for me. And I just kept hoping and praying that she was going to stay in there and get the help that she desperately needed.
So when she finally signed those papers saying that she was going to be in and stay, did you recognize that it was all over? Was that like the dream and the hope that she's in treatment, they're going to get rid of this, and she's going to be on her merry way in life?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Okay, so where were you at when she signed the papers and admitted herself?
This is the beginning.
Oh, okay. So how did you... So a lot of families that I deal with, they actually think that that's like, this is the end.
No, that was just the beginning. Her recovery is an ongoing, everyday process.
So how did you learn that?
Just by her talking to me about it.
And so how did you know that prior to the day that she signed going into treatment, that this was the beginning? Because a lot of people, a lot of family members, they believe that just because their child went into treatment, it's all over. It's not the beginning of the end. It's like the end now.
No, because whatever she was learning in the treatment center, she had to still use those tools when she came out of treatment.
Yeah.
To keep moving forward.
Yeah. So, so did you just know that's what it was going to be? Nobody sat you down and talked to you about that?
I had looked and I had gotten some information about the
There you go.
facility.
There
Yes,
you
I
go.
did.
There you go. Because see, a lot of people have this preconceived notion that if you send them to treatment, it's like sending them to the hospital and they're going to get their hip replaced. Like that's almost the thought.
No.
And the reality is it's not like that. This is the beginning of them taking the layers of their emotional onion off, right? So congrats to you. Hats off, man. I have yet to meet many parents who've actually done that part. A lot of parents from what I say this all the time in our Facebook groups, man. I tell them, you need to read one about the facility and the philosophy that they're going through, because that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And you have to recognize, just because your kid's in treatment, you also need to go get treatment, because what we've just recognized in this conversation right now is how toxic and fucked up that relationship is when our child is using, and how much we hoodwig ourselves, the brainwashing we put our own selves through, right? And not seeing that, like, it's not that you could have did anything different. It is the way that addiction is, and the only time that we really get out of the blind, so to say, is where you're at now, and you see, oh yeah, I'm not doing that again. It's not, I shouldn't have did that. You did it.
Yeah.
There's nothing you do about it. It's, I'm not going to do that again. Mm-hmm. Right. So let's fast forward. She gets out of treatment and a relapse occurs. How did you handle that?
Okay. The first time that she got sober, she was sober for 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then she relapsed. And again, as a mother, you feel guilty.
Yeah.
Okay, wasn't I supportive enough to keep her,
Yeah.
Sober?
Yeah.
Here we go again.
Yeah.
What's going to happen now? Is she going to survive this time, or is something going to happen and she's going to die?
Yeah.
So you're like, it's a revolving circle. It just keeps going and going. It's like, here we go again.
Let's talk about the trust. When she relapsed, where was your trust level when she came out of treatment?
When she came out and she was sober for the 8 months, the trust was rebuilding. Like I was starting.
You didn't give it back to her. You didn't give her 100% right away.
No, because you don't.
Yeah.
You're always on edge. It's always in the back of my mind that, okay, am I going to show up over there, or am I going to get a phone call and she's drunk?
Yeah. Yeah. I will tell you, out of all the years that I've been helping addicts, the ones that are less successful are the ones that get everything back from their family. Like right away. They get out of treatment, they get a brand new car. They help them with their first month's rent. Their kids are back in their life, and the wife is talking about maybe moving back in with them. Those guys are the guys that didn't earn it, or those people are the people that didn't earn it. And when you don't earn something, you can't keep it. You can't be given sobriety. It's not something that somebody can just say, here's the gift. No, it doesn't. It just doesn't work like that. So hats off to you again. Congrats for being, toes in the water as opposed to jumping in, because that's a big difference from a lot of the families that I've seen with addicts, where they're just like, well, here you go. They need a fresh, brand new start.
Yeah.
That doesn't help. That it really doesn't help. They have to claw a little bit. They have to claw. Our addiction was hard earned, right? And the way how I say that is, you look at where Chelsea's end was. That's hard earned. You don't get to that end because yesterday you just started drinking a 60 a day.
Right.
Right? That it didn't happen like that. It happened because the tolerance was built to that point. The bottom is a hard earn, and you earn it in a hard way. Mm-hmm. Your active recovery has to be earned just as hard. It's a difficult process, and then it becomes easier. how that works. Like I said, I can't tell you why or how that works. All I know is it works, right? So here you are, she relapses, and you've now, I would suggest maybe trust is diminished at this point, or do you still have an inkling?
Oh, no, there's still trust there, but it has diminished.
So you still have a glimmer.
Oh, yeah, there's always a glimmer of hope.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
There's
There you
always
go.
a glimmer of hope.
Yeah. Yeah. We always say there's always hope as long as they're breathing.
Yeah,
Right.
there you go.
That's
exactly.
an AA saying, right? So obviously it was so she relapses. All these thoughts are going through your head of what didn't I do?
Yeah.
And how did you knock those down, or did you just take it on? Like how did you deal with that?
I just took it on.
Yeah.
When she was sober for 8 months, she had just gone into a detox facility and detoxed for 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was sober for those 8 months.
Wow, she willed it for 8 months.
She willed it for 8 months after a 5-day detox.
Okay.
But she didn't follow through with anything else like to keep her sober. She wasn't going to meetings. She didn't have a sponsor. Mm-hmm. So she had no support from outside of me. And
So no support from the sober community, so to say.
Exactly.
Air quotes.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, the trust had diminished, but there was still the hope that she could get back on that path, sort of thing, to recovery, which she didn't for quite a while. And then she went into this other facility, and she's been great. It'll be 2 years in June. She's been sober. So, yeah, of course, and yes, I enabled her when she would start having the DT so bad. And Chelsea did mention that I went and I took her a Mickey of vodka to take that edge off.
So again, prior to the show, I said that I'll be the one with the, how would I say, I'll break the leash on that. Because the reality is if you hadn't did that, she probably would have died or could have died, or at the very least got brain damage. Because when somebody is just stopped drinking like that, I mean, I'll put it to you this way. When I was thrown in jail and I had DTs, the guards were betting on how quickly I would knock myself out because my head was knocking off the floor so quick, right? From the convulsions that I was going through, right? So the reality of you doing that, literally you have to give her medicine. That's what we would call today harm reduction. And even in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it tells me that I need to keep alcohol or have access to alcohol to help somebody come off. Because when we look at harm reduction, really what that is it's a measurement of incremental use of their substance of use to get them to a place of zero use. So we have to wean them off. The body's so messed up that it's unlikely that it's going to just cold turkey it. The only substances that you can really cold turkey is like methamphetamine, cocaine, acid, marijuana. Those are the ones that you can just cold turkey. Cigarettes, even cigarettes to a big degree, you cannot cold turkey. That's why they have the patch.
Right.
Because it's more than just a physical addiction, it's a mental addiction as well. And when we look at alcoholism, that's the same thing. So is heroin. So those are the three substances ever in our world. So opiates, alcohol, and tobacco are the three substances you are more likely needing to be weaned off of. So as much as we may look at the physical, what we would consider that as physical enabling, I would consider what you're actually doing was you saved your life physically at that moment. Where I would consider enabling is the emotional enabling. So one of the things that I will, like, let's say one of my sponsees goes back out drinking and they call me and they're crying in their pity pot. I hang up the phone. And the reason why I hang up the phone is because I'm not going to be their emotional crutch anymore. They need to deal with their bullshit so that their bottom comes. Okay? If their bottom doesn't come, and I'm always their emotional crutch, they're never going to reach that point where they say, fuck it, and their hands go up and they say, I can't do this anymore. It takes such a longer time for that to happen, right? And I know it's very difficult for families to do that.
I couldn't walk away.
I totally get it. It's hard. It's hard, right? I mean, it's hard. It's hard for that stuff to happen, especially as a sponsor, knowing that I hold more weight in addiction to one of my sponsees than their own family does, and having to turn around and say, you know what, you need to go to a meeting. I'm not the right one for you to call right now. And that becomes difficult even in its own breath, because like I said, I understand the weight and gravity that my words kind of contribute to it all, right?
Okay.
And so that it's a hard call, but sometimes you need that bottom to happen more so, because I can love them to death. Especially a family member, I can love that person to death. And that's what ends up becoming. Did you guys ever consider an intervention?
No.
Did you know, you obviously watched the show.
I've watched it occasionally.
Yeah. Did you think that would, from watching this show, that might help?
I thought it might.
Did you use any of the tactics from that show?
No.
No?
No.
So a lot of people believe that interventions are to get the addict to treatment. It's not. It's about the family saying goodbye in order for the addict to find a bottom. I've gone into a lot of discussions with certain people around here in the city who believe that that's the wrong approach to take. But I can tell you that approach is more significant at times for success in a right away than enduring a length of time of use. One of the things that I would always suggest families, if your child gets to a point, you have to gauge this. And I would consider this as a good conversation between you and I as well as this. When Chelsey went to treatment, where were you with energy level? Because you'd seen her go through all this stuff, right? And then she goes to treatment, like a real treatment down south, and then gets out of treatment, and then a relapse happens.
No, the relapse didn't happen after she was down south.
It was after. Yeah, that's right. She's been good since then.
Yeah.
So she goes into detox, she comes out, and then you think about all the energy to get her to that detox center, comes out, and then the relapse happens. How much energy did you have left in the tank at that point?
Not a whole lot.
And this is why I say to some families, look, it's better for you to wait for them to call from detox or treatment, because they put themselves in, right? Because up to that point, there's sweet nothings and promises and all this stuff. And it's so like all of that, I guess, compiled would also hurt the trust issue between mother and daughter or mother and son, right?
Yeah.
So we have to recognize that as well. So that being said, do you think efforts are better? If you could go back looking at it now, do you think efforts are better to be wholly consolidated with energy at the time that they go into treatment as opposed to pushing them through an active addiction? It's a tough question.
That's tough.
That's tough.
That's tough.
Now, let me ask you this, is also coupled with it. Do you think it would have been easier if you had a support group around you when she was going through active addiction that wasn't family? Just mothers like yourself who've gone through it.
Yes. Because I didn't have anybody that I could talk to about her addiction. Mm-hmm. When I was all worried and stressing out and crying at night, wondering what was going to happen if she was that she was going to get killed or whatever.
Yeah.
I didn't have anybody that I could go and speak with.
Yeah.
I didn't want to talk to my family about it because, unfortunately, my family can be very negative and judgmental. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want them judging Chelsey any more than they already had before.
Yeah.
So everything was kept to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I had no support.
You feel very alone, eh?
I was very much alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I had known that there was other people out there
Yeah.
that could have helped me through that, it would have been great.
Yeah. And I think even pre-show, we had discussed what the reasoning is for this specific episode. And I think that holds a lot of weight when we recognize that it's necessary for us to talk about these difficult things so that other parents who are in the place where their child is in active addiction, how they might be able to cope. Because at this point, you have the advantage of 20/20 hindsight, right?
Yeah.
And the things that we're discussing, like the hard call of when is your energy best used? Is it used while they're going through active addiction? Or is it better to save it up when they finally call you from detox or treatment? I'm not saying to exclude yourself out of their life in active addiction. All I'm saying is to have one of these, if I could say an attitude of, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it.
And I did have that attitude at times.
Excellent. That's
I
awesome.
did.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, okay. I've heard this before.
How long did it take? How many times did she say it until you were like, yeah, I'll see it when I believe it?
Too many times to count.
Yeah. Yeah. So if there's anything that we could say to a parent, don't fucking believe them. Because the person that we're looking at as an addict is not your child anymore.
No.
Right? That's the fact. It's a demon. It physically looks like what you gave birth to.
Yeah.
But the reality is what's coming out of their mouth is not who they are. Right? And we have to recognize that in the moment.
No, the person that Chelsea was when she was actively drinking and doing the drugs and stuff, she was not my daughter.
Yeah.
She was very argumentative. She was bitter. She was very resentful. She was not who she is now.
Yeah.
When I went and visited her in treatment when she went down south, even in the first 2 weeks, I was shocked at the difference in her. I thought, oh my God, my daughter's back.
See, and in that moment, this is where I find families give everything back. Because I'm not saying you, but I'm saying as soon as the family sees, oh my God, look at the change.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden it's this they consolidate, well, what can we do to make it easier for you? Right?
Right.
And you and I both know now, is that going to help?
No.
So you were saying 2 weeks in, you saw that there was a huge change in her?
There was a big change in her,
Yeah.
yes.
And so where's the hope level there?
It's growing.
Yeah.
It is definitely growing.
Yeah. Were you giving recognition and kudos to the treatment center or to Chelsea?
To Chelsea.
Good for you.
To Chelsea, because
Good for you.
she was the one doing the work.
That's awesome.
They were giving her the work that she needed to do, and she was doing the work.
That's awesome.
I was so proud of her for the changes in her while she was there and how she has continued to progress now.
So you and I were talking a little bit about what sobriety looks like for you. And when we first had that pre-interview conversation, you're like, it hadn't really dawned on you that maybe there is a sobriety between mom and daughter. And then when we were talking about the trust level in regards to like watching her do things in sobriety, what this then does is it allows us to step back with recognizing and respecting that their own independence.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's really what I meant by that. Because before, we're so involved in the decisions that they're making, and we think that we're responsible for them, as we had discussed in the beginning of the show.
Right.
But what we had to recognize is that they're an adult. We're not responsible for it, And so now that she's making these gains in her sobriety, how do you, I guess, like for instance, if she were to go to a meeting, how much is that a positive towards your outlook on her managing her own sobriety?
If she goes to a meeting, that just shows me that she realizes that she still needs the help besides what she's doing for herself.
Yeah, and I mean, I think even in the context of the word help, I think for addicts, just because I know that there's going to be addicts who are listening to this show, I think that's just an acknowledgement of that we all have to recognize that this is not a way of living that one person can do. Because I'll tell you this, I'm pretty honest with myself, and I can be pretty brutally honest with myself, and sometimes I'm painfully sober, like literally painfully sober. But my sponsor, the person who I've employed to be the compassionate person to me and also sometimes the toughest person in my life to me.
Okay.
That's what they do, because it's not about providing help. Actually, what it is, it's about keeping each other accountable in order to live this life. Because it's no longer my mom's responsibility to engage in my recovery. My responsibility is to be healthy, to engage in a relationship with my mom. That's my responsibility. And once I accepted that, like I said previously in other shows, me and my mother, we don't talk about my recovery at all.
Chelsey and I don't really discuss her recovery. I'm just so proud of seeing the strides that she's made.
Yeah.
We don't really, I guess that's kind of talking about her recovery, but her addiction, but I don't see it like that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is when you see her make these actions in her recovery that are recovery based, it's her. She's actually making a move towards being around other people who are sober, so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
The thing that comes about of it is that she's independently working in her own sobriety, right? And then where's that fear level about a relapse? Does it diminish a little bit less because she's making these independent gains?
Oh yeah, it is definitely diminished.
So, and that's a huge deal, right? Because now that you've lived through a relapse, and you know what that looks like and how quick she was right back to where she was prior to going in, right? What I think we all recognize is that it's more difficult after a relapse to gain the trust. So we in recovery, this is what we say. We never kick the wounded, but your credibility is for shit. Right? The credibility is something that takes a long time to learn and gain. Right? And there's a huge piece to, are you really doing that? Like let me ask you this, when she came out of treatment, were you still kind of like, yeah, I'll believe it until I see it? Was there still a thought of that in your mind?
Of the one when she went down south?
Yeah, after she came back.
Yeah. It was there.
Yeah.
There was a little bit, it's like, okay, is something going to happen that is going to stress her out and she's going to go to the nearest liquor store?
Yeah. So let me ask you this. What are some of the actions that Chelsey made that reinforced that you could have some confidence and some confidence in her decision-making through sobriety?
She just kept being positive. Mm-hmm. She was just so positive, and things were stressing her out, but she started doing her meditation. She started really calming herself down so that she wouldn't turn to that drink.
Yeah, I mean, and those are all reinforced by action.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We can say things that we want all day long, but bullshit walks and money talks, so to say, right? You need to have the action in order for the words to be real. And if you don't have the words to be real, that's okay. If you don't have the words to be real, like if your words aren't real because it's not reinforced by action, again, your credibility is for shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's a hard, cold fact. And I think for a parent, I think you're probably, I would suggest at this time, callous to the fact of, yeah, you got to prove, you got to show me for me to buy in now. You know what I mean? There's the naivety about active addiction is gone. You're no longer naive to how deceitful that disease is.
True.
Right? Did you always recognize her addiction as a disease? Because that's another question we get all the time where parents are like, is it really a disease? Yeah, it is. But
I don't know if I really considered it as a disease. I just, maybe naive, I guess, just say, oh, she just drinks too much. She's got a drinking problem. You don't see it as a disease.
yeah, I think it's difficult for people outside of it. I know alcoholics, when we come to recognize that it is a disease, it's like an allergy. Really. You may be able to have 2 or 3 glasses of wine and go to bed. I just don't metabolize wine like you do.
Right.
I just don't. The bottles are what? Why would you go to bed with the bottle like not even half gone? Like that to me is like if an alcoholic's in court and the judge says, you have another drink, you're going to jail. Well, fuck, I wonder what they're drinking in jail. It's not a thought of like it's not there. No, it's there.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what we mean by the disease. It's a disease with an allergy. And the allergy is what sets off the obsession of the thinking of the mind. So once I have that substance in me, that's it. I'm off to the races. And this is where addicts and alcoholics are able to accept the premise of the responsibility of the first drink. This is why I said when I first drank, I knew I was not a normal user. I knew it. And now it's like 9 years old. I knew I was not normal. I was not like other people, right? And because of that, nobody could have ever changed the outcome of what my drinking and using was going to be. It was destined to be, so to say. It was going to happen. Let me ask you, with us having that conversation, how do you feel now about your, like, I say this with air quotes, responsibility for addiction? Can we recognize that addiction is actually bigger than mother and daughter?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's easier to accept that way.
It is. Yeah.
And I think if there's anything that we really disseminate to any of the other parents listening, it's not your responsibility. As much as we want to claim it, it's bigger. It's a bigger issue than any one person in their life. I almost compare addiction to God. Because when it comes calling, I'll answer how much and I'll give you more. Right? That's how we answer as addicts.
Okay. Yep.
If you can accept the premise of God being real, I don't care what your ideology is of God. My point is, if God is real and it came in front of you, you would say to it, well, how do I be part of you? Right? Like how do I get accepted? That is our addiction.
All right.
Same deal, right? It's that big. So for a person to say, well, what did I do? Really, we've missed the boat in the context of how big the problem really is, because not one person can give a solution, right? Even me, I still say I don't have the only solution I have towards my next drink is a prayer. I'm a prayer away from my next relapse, right? And that's how cunning and powerful addiction really is. On this side of things, are you going to engage more so in mothers' support groups for addiction?
I am.
Yeah.
Yes, I will be for sure.
Because I think it's a huge deal, and the things that you said here. I mean, I thank you for your candor and your honesty.
You're welcome.
Because it takes a lot.
Thank you for having me on the show.
I mean, it takes a lot, right? Is there any other advice that you might want to give parents out there about their children and addiction, or anything that's really on the top of your mind you really want to push out there?
Patience.
Yeah.
Patience. And keep the hope.
Yeah.
Keep that glimmer of hope.
Talk to people in active addiction.
And talk to people, yes.
Well, talk to people in active recovery, I mean to say,
yeah.
to help your kid, right?
Yes.
And the decision, I think, so we've had Chris Suchit on the show before, way back when. Chelsey wasn't on the show yet at that time, but Chris has been working with addicts for a long time. I will say anybody who's going through active addiction with their child, you got to go listen to those episodes. One's called Self-Care and the other one's called Evolution of Drug Treatment. You got to listen to those episodes because Chris gives a huge insight of looking for a counselor that will work with the mom going through when your child's going through active addiction. Because as you were saying, you felt all alone.
Yeah.
And here in Alberta, there are free places to go to. You can go to the Family Crisis Center, and they will give you free counseling if you cannot provide income to pay for that counseling. You can go talk to those people. And if the counselor doesn't fit for you, fucking fire them and find one that does fit for you. Because not every counselor is for every person that's out there.
No.
They're not miracle workers. I mean, there's personality conflicts sometimes, right? So, and I would suggest that there's probably, if you can't find a counselor, go to Al-Anon or Narc-Anon meetings. They will help you as a parent. These are parents who have children in active sobriety or active addiction. Go to those groups, and if you can't find those groups there, go on Facebook. There's a ton of them, just a ton of them. So anyways, thanks for coming in, Lori. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
So to find the After the Show blog, Chelsey will actually be blogging about this episode. You can go to www.lifeonlifestermspodcast.com, and you can also check us out on any of the podcasting apps. We are also on Facebook. You can check us out at Life on Life's Terms Podcast on Facebook. You can also go to Instagram, Life on Life's Terms Podcast. You can check out us on Twitter, Life on Life's Terms Podcast. Please become a member. All it takes is your email, and by giving us your email, we will always keep you up to date on the upcoming shows that are coming out. We will never sell your email to any of our sponsors. And you can also check us out at minds.com. On that platform, we are not censored at all. We are on a blockchain, and so we can say whatever the hell we want without Facebook pulling us. Guys, have a wonderful Friday, and we will talk to you soon. Bye for now.